say a few words about this book here, which of course is a piece that we did as a result of Manny Marble's biography of Malcolm X, which of course won the Pulitzer Prize. And my association with Malcolm is I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Malcolm. That back in the, say, early 60s, I was in the military and about to go crazy because I'm doing all this reading, all this studying, and no one to talk to. And so I heard Malcolm, and it was like someone cutting into your heart and then stitching it back up, because he was speaking truth to not only us, but to power. And so I always credit him as the first person to give me my voice. You know, and then other persons are, and I need to mention them all the time when I speak to the public, which I think you need to know about them, Margaret and Charlie Burroughs. Margaret Burroughs and Charlie Burroughs founded the first black museum in the country, the DuSable Museum in Chicago. And so I went there where I was stationed at Fort Sheridan, Illinois, trying to grow a natural in the Army. And Margaret Burroughs was in the kitchen working on a linoleum cut. And I didn't know what a linoleum cut is, but she's one of the finest artists, visualizers we've ever produced. And I walked in, and at first when I saw a black woman in a natural, Sister Beverly, and she said, "What you want, boy?" I said, well, I need to talk to somebody. I gotta, you know, I got all these questions, and I saw that it was an Ebony Museum of Negro History. I said, let me come here. She said, go upstairs and talk to my husband. Now, he's on the second floor. His name is Charlie Burroughs. I did not know at that time Charlie Burroughs had been raised in USSR. He spoke Russian fluently. And so I went up there, and he had this sitting at the table writing and reading. He had this glass of clear liquid by him. And I said, your wife, I need to come up here and talk to you. He said, well, sit down. Sit down. You want something to drink? I said, we got water there? He said, no, this is vodka. So, you know my background. I don't drink nothing. I haven't drank anything. But anyway, that was the start of a beautiful relationship. So I volunteered at the DuSable Museum, which was in their home. It was in their home, okay, for about 3 or 4 years. And then I met through Margaret Burroughs, Dudley Randall, who founded Broadside Press, which was the first serious black publishing company devoted to publishing black poets. And Dudley Randall and Margaret Burroughs, after Malcolm had been assassinated, they came together to put out this book called For Malcolm. And they gathered all these poets and prose writers, and we put that together. And that was my first relationship with Dudley Randall, and he published my, I published my first book myself, which was Think Black, back in 1966. Then he picked up the next book, Black Pride. Then he published Think Black, and then from there on, he published about 10 books, and we became family. And then there was a man by the name of Point W. Fuller. Point W. Fuller, H-O-Y-T. He was the managing editor of Negro Digest Black World magazine. If you really want to know what happened during the Black Arts movement, the Black Empowerment movement between 65 and 75, read Negro Digest Black World magazine. And I was involved in the name change of Black World, Negro Digest of Black World magazine. And then there was Barbara Ann Sizemore, premier educator in this country, Barbara Ann Sizemore. She's the one that slapped me out of my sexism. She was talking some nonsense, and she called me out. I said, this will never happen again. In public, And so we became family. Again, that's what happens when truth hits you.
Right, right.
Because I, just like most men in this country, have been raised to be sexist. And backwards and everything else. Patriarchal and all this mess. And so Barbara became a big sister to me. In fact, I got my first honorary doctorate from DePaul University because she was the dean of the School of Education at DePaul. And then, of course, the person who was a cultural mother to me for over 33 years was Gwendolyn Brooks. And there's a big history that I'm not going to go into now. Other than I like to just make sure that you all know that I'm here as a result of standing on the shoulders of those persons. Right? That I didn't, just drop out of the sky and say, this is brilliant. That's not true. And so we come here, this afternoon to and really celebrate our brother. And for me, as I mentioned, he gave me my voice. I'm just going to say a few words and I'm going to introduce our panel. And like many of you all here, when Malcolm was assassinated, it hurt. I mean, it just hurt so badly. And I wrote about this in some other books, so I just stopped for a minute. But, you know, we live in a short, you know, we're like a short memory people. We don't have long memories. And as a result of that, we keep making mistakes over and over and over again. And quiet as a kept, even though President Barack Obama did not live up to what many of us were wanting him to do the first 4 years, I think he's going to do it the second 4 years. He's already, you know, got tall as a result of standing up for Sister Rice at the UN. You know, don't go after her, come after me. Right. I don't like that. All right. And so, as we look around the country and we look at black communities around the country, we're still in trouble. We're in deep trouble. And part of our responsibility, most certainly my responsibility, is to not let us forget that. Number two, in terms of third world press, which is having difficult times now. But what publisher is not having difficult times unless you have a whole string of money coming in to you on a daily basis? And you have the mass media making sure you stay alive. But there's a big war now between Amazon and regular book publishers. But the mission of third world press is to tell our story. It's not to lie. It's not to talk about how we're superior to anybody. It's just to tell our story. And any people who are in control of their own cultural imperatives, they're about the healthy replication of themselves. Can I get an eye on that? That's it. I mean, a healthy replication of ourselves. It's not about against this person, against that person, but what did we do? You see? How did we get here? I mean, we didn't walk on water to get here. I mean, we didn't come first class American Airlines. How did we get here? So what's the history there? We can't forget that history. And the other key point is this: the great majority of black people in this country, we are not going anywhere. This is our land. We built this land.
Right, right.
And so, yeah, so you have a good number of our people fighting for reparations. So whether it comes or not, we still got to keep going. All right? And so we're short memory people. So white supremacy is a system that dominates black life from cradle to grave. Therefore, black life is seldom formally taught in our institutions, and even less discussed informally. Malcolm X told our stories over and over again. And each telling gained substance and nuance as he grew. As he grew and studied and struggled and traveled himself. And as he dialogued with heads of states and others. Debated with family, friends, and foes, all making a statement on his ever-expanding maturity. His storytelling, especially his analysis of white supremacy, enabled us to tell our stories without the customary editing by enemies and cowards. The moral and cultural imagination of Malcolm X transitioned into our own lives, producing generations of cultural sons and daughters who do not tap dance to the latest feel-good tunes provided by government or corporate America. He arrived during a time of deep winter, and it is still cold, with snow falling during the summer months. Okay. And it's important that we understand that the culture of white supremacy is pernicious, you know, and it's all-encompassing. And most of us, and not all of the institutional structures of the United States, I mean, it is ingrained in white supremacy, or white nationalism, all right? So including the black community, and in many cases, even the black church. The political, historical, commercial, legal, and educational institutions have nurtured, guide, inform, and employ, entertain, educate, and define black life and development in America represent the front lines of white supremacy thought, theory, and practice. And I always say, you're not going to walk into your home and tell exactly where you are culturally. What's on your wall, or the images on your wall, do they reflect the best of our culture? What's on your bookshelves, if you got a bookshelf? What are you reading? Right? That defines you. You go to your CD collection, what are you listening to? What kind of music? Great black music or booty call music? What are you listening to? Go to your CD collection. You know, I mean, your DVD collection. What are you looking at? Especially the DVDs that are wrapped up in the brown paper bags. What are you looking at? Then you go to the children's room. What's on their walls? Darth Vader, Mickey Mouse, and Donald Duck. You wonder why we in trouble. You know why we in trouble. You know what? So we have difficulty, but it is our charge. It is our responsibility. And I get back to what I said earlier. Any people who want to control their own culture and imperatives. Our problem is we are not controlling our own culture and imperatives. That's why the Broxton Center is such a beautiful and wonderful place, because it does represent the best of us, the best of us. I met Betty Shabazz in 1971. We've been close friends with the Shabazz family. I met on a plane between Chicago and New York. The Shabazz daughters have suffered in unbelievable ways, having lived through the tragic death of both parents. This is a story worthy of Toni Morrison novel, but it's not fiction. Professor Marble has accepted the culture of, quote, say or write anything and prove me wrong, end quote. With this total disregard for the political and cultural effects his words and accusations would have on anyone, especially the family. When I met Betty, Dr. Shabazz, she was finishing up her PhD, doctorate, and she was going on with her life. She was on the faculty at Megadeth College, and I just went up there and sat down with her and just started talking, all right? And I started a beautiful relationship that lasted until she passed. And Betty Shabazz took care of her daughters. Her grandson was involved with her tragic death. And that he has had a tragic life himself. And this is the namesake of Malcolm. Been in and out of prison. Well, homes more than prison. But he's out now and he's trying to get his life together. And her memorial, what I call the first families, Mrs. Evers, Mrs. King, Ozzie Davis and Ruby D, and we were the people to speak at the memorial for Betty Shabazz. And so I pledged my life and what I can do to not only keep his name, their name alive, but to keep all of what we have up front. We're not going to lie to anybody. We're not going to, we can just stand up front. So it's important that we understand that essentially, as history would have it, this collection is edited by 4 men who have been influenced and critically impacted by the life and work of Malcolm X. All the contributors also have felt and benefited in unknown ways from the presence of our beloved brother, and carefully composed their essays as a contribution to the wonderful legacy of Minister Malcolm. The royalties from this book will go to the Malcolm X and Dr. Betty Shabazz Foundation in New York City. And what we've done, whatever programs that they have been putting on, we just send the boxes of books. And so I made my comment there, and I want to, just bring on this wonderful group of panelists who are contributors to By Any Means Necessary, Malcolm X Will Not Reinvented. And I guess I would say one thing: I do not have anything personally against Manny Marble. I feel that he's a scholar, serious man, and just tragically died, the weekend before his book was published. And so I'm not here ever to beat him up. And I don't believe in ad hominem attacks. And so what we tried to do was stick close to what was in the book and to deal with what's in the book. And that's what we asked all the contributors to do. And we have contributors in the book who are very critical of Dr. Manny Marble's work, and we have contributors who are in support of his work. So I try to have a balance somewhat. Clyde Ledbetter, a doctoral student of African American Studies at Temple University. He's also a graduate student assistant here at the Southern African American Collection, where he has contributed to the Digital Humanities Initiative to make the William Steele papers widely accessible. and of course the email sites there.
I usually during these programs I sit right over there behind that computer, and it's really because of Dr. Diane Turner that I even heard about this book, that Mr. Boyd, Dr. Madhubuti, and Dr. Karanga, and Dr. Daniel were looking for contributors about the Mirable text. And Dr. Turner, one day I was over there doing my work, and Dr. Turner said, "You should submit some. You read the book, you probably have an opinion, submit some." And I'm thinking in my mind, I'm just some punk graduate student. The people writing in this book will probably be, luminaries, which they are. And where do I stand in that? So I said, I'll write something and just they'll probably say no, so I'll just. Surprisingly, they accepted my essay, my opinion, and I'm grateful and honored to be included in that collection and to be included on this panel with Dr. Fraser, Dr. Jennings, and being moderated by Dr. Mark. My essay, before I start, and I would be remiss not to say this in front of such a large audience, Malcolm's life was about struggle. And like Dr. Madhubuti discussed it in his introduction, our struggle continues. And although maybe a minor struggle, it's still an important one. And right here at Temple University, a struggle is brewing between the university and the Department of African American Studies. And with such a large crowd here, I'm imploring you, I think if you go on the website well, not the website, but there's a petition going around. Long story short, the university is trying to deny us proper leadership in our department. And they are trying to push upon us a new vision of African American studies that's not in line with what we want, it's not in line with what the community wants, and it's not in line with the mission of our discipline. So if we can get some type of sign-up sheet going around with the email addresses, and phone numbers, where you can contact, because there is a struggle that we'll need all your support on upcoming. This is my little commercial. But back to the essay. My essay was on more of the reaction to Mirable's text, and it was entitled Malcolm, Charisma, and Ancestry. And what I basically argue is that there was such a heated reaction from the African American community to Mirable's text because it was viewed as an attack on a charismatic ancestor. And I go on the text to discuss, what charisma means and what ancestry means to our community. I begin with discussing implicit and explicit goals. What was, as scholars, when we sit down to write a book, an essay, an editorial, there has to be some goal behind it, some implicit goal. And Dr. Mirable understands this, because in his text, when he talks about the autobiography, he talks about the implicit goals of both Malcolm X and Alex Haley. At the beginning, Malcolm's implicit goal was to use the autobiography to exalt Elijah Muhammad, to show how the teachings of Elijah Muhammad can change someone from the life that they were living to the life that he had at the time. As he broke from the nation and moved on, the implicit goal changed to really expose his new political ideology, although that didn't make it into the autobiography as a result of the implicit goals of Alex Haley, who wanted to use autobiography as a way to show what happens in America if we keep this segregated system, this horrible system of oppression. Will create these people like Malcolm, these angry black men like Malcolm. So that was Alex Haley's implicit goal. But because he passed away, we don't know Dr. Mirable's implicit goal. He gives us a goal in the book, and his goal was to, the purpose of the book, and this is right in the text, was to go beyond the legend to recount what actually occurred in Malcolm's life. To go beyond the legend and find out what actually occurred in Malcolm's life. Now, like I said, I'm just a punk graduate student, I don't know too much, but what I know about Malcolm X and the legends I've heard, you know, I never heard of, you know, Malcolm going to the South with one machete and killing 300 Klansmen, or Malcolm went to Africa by himself and into Angola and attacked the Portuguese. But these aren't the, I never heard any legends. The only legend I heard was a young boy whose father was killed by the Klan, whose mother, due to mental health reasons, was unable to care for her children, who was separated from his family, raised in oppressive foster homes and foster care, who grew up as a teenager on the streets, got into criminal activity, went to jail, got religion, turned his life around, and changed the lives of millions of people all over the world, and to this day. That's the legend I know. Mm-hmm. And so when Dr. Miracle says he wants to go beyond the legend, I don't know what's untrue about that story, what's exaggerated about that, and why we need to go beyond that. In fact, he says the only thing he cites in here, he says, in Malcolm's case, the memoirs written by friends and relatives have illustrated that the notorious outlaw Detroit Red character Malcolm presented in his autobiography is highly exaggerated. The actual criminal record of Malcolm Little for the years 1941 through 46 supports the contention that he deliberately built up his criminal history, weaving elements of his past into allegory documenting the destructive consequences of racism within the U.S. criminal justice and penal system. Self-invention was an effective way for him to reach the most marginalized sectors of the black community, giving justification to their hopes. And then that's it. So the only thing that we can, that Miracle can say that Malcolm lied about or exaggerated about was his criminal activity, that he exaggerated it. But that's not just where Miracle starts. He goes on adding to, or supposedly going beyond the legend by creating a legend of his own. A legend of sexual escapades outside of his marriage, a legend of homosexual prostitution that he writes about. These are legends. And that was what many people saw as the attack on this charismatic ancestor, this attack on Malcolm X. Why are you doing this, Mr. Miracle? Why are you putting this legend that you created? And what I do in my essay is try to understand our community's reaction to this attack on this charismatic ancestor. So I begin by looking at what is charisma. What is charisma? It's a term that's thrown around a lot, like revolution. A term that, you know, sneakers can be revolutionary and reality TV show stars can be charismatic. It's a term that a lot of people don't really understand completely. Even Miracle, because in this text, he calls Tupac Shakur a charismatic figure. Now, if you understand what charisma is, you can understand that Tupac's not necessarily charismatic. He's likable, and charismatic is not a substitute for likability. Charisma is a very specific sociological definition, and it was really popularized and coined by the German sociologist Max Weber. And Weber, when he discusses charisma, he discusses as one of his 3 types of authority. Weber talks about 3 types of authority: traditional, rational, legalistic, and charismatic. Now, for Weber, traditional authority is like your kings, queens, monarchs, popes, that type of thing. That these people hold these positions that go back to time immemorial, and that's the base of their authority. Rational, legalistic is more modern. That's, you know, your parliamentarians, your presidents, your congress people, that sort of thing. But charisma is a very specific type of authority and a very specific type of leadership. According to Weber, charismatic authority rests on the devotion of the polity to the specific and exceptional sanctity, heroism, or explanatory character of an individual person, and that of the normative patterns or order revealed or ordained by him. Charismatic authority is said to exist when an individual's claim to specific gifts of body and mind is acknowledged by others as a valid basis for their participation in an extraordinary program of action. That's important, an extraordinary program of action. The charismatic leader leads his followers outside the realm of everyday routine. He or she repudiates the past and is, in a sense, a specifically revolutionary force. The followers obtain freedom from the commonplace, the ordinary, the recurrent, by surrendering to both the initiatives of the leader and the emotional centers of his own being. And the thing about charisma, Malcolm's charisma was a very simple type of charisma, what Weber called pure charisma. And pure charisma is something that can't be taught, learned, or inherited. It becomes naturally, and more specifically in the eyes of followers, from supernatural forces given to the leader. Malcolm's pure charisma was displayed early in his life when he was elected class president and given some measure of authority in a predominantly white school in rural Michigan in the 1930s. You have to be charismatic if you're going to be that type of position with white people in the 30s. You know, the same pure charisma will lead him in his underground life, where people will follow him and do exceptionally bad things. That's it. That's it. And it was the same pure charismatic leadership that would blossom over the years and allow Malcolm to build off the work of the semi-charismatic Elijah Muhammad. Elijah Muhammad was more of a traditional leader in the varying sense. He inherited his position from probably a truly charismatic person in W.D. Farad, who came from somewhere else and convinced a lot of black people that he was Allah. That takes charisma to do. So when he disappears and Elijah Muhammad, you know, takes control of the nation, it's more of a traditional sense of authority. But Malcolm's authority rested in his pure charisma. So he was able to take an organization of a few hundred people and turn it into an organization with a number in the tens of thousands and affect the lives of millions. Malcolm's leadership as a minister and top recruiter for the Nation of Islam would truly lead his followers outside the realm of the everyday routine. And that's what a charismatic leader has to do. It's not just being a leader, not just being authority, but taking the group and the members of that group and taking them out of their everyday routine and lead them on a program of extraordinary action. So you had to do that. He had to be charismatic to build an organization like this, because the nation, the strictness of the nation's regulation for its members and the complete life changes that occurred for those who converted to his program could only be made attractive to those outside the organization through the medium of charismatic figure, which Malcolm was. More on pure charisma, Anton Allah writes, "It is particularly disdainful of economic pursuits or economic gain and prefers to be supported by voluntary gifts and communal largesses." And throughout Malcolm's time in the nation, he didn't seek any financial gain. You know, he lived an extremely modest life, even with a wife and 4 children. He didn't even own his own home. So it was this pure charisma that differentiated Malcolm's authority ultimately from that of Elijah Muhammad, whose charisma was more traditional, like I said. Malcolm's pure, and in relation to Elijah Muhammad, greater charisma will ultimately lead to his break with the nation. His charismatic authority was so strong that even without a well-defined program, he was followed out of the nation by large numbers of faithful who had hitherto structured their lives on teaching Elijah Muhammad. It was this pure charisma that made Malcolm's split from the nation so dangerous for so many different groups. For those in leadership positions inside the nation, Malcolm's charismatic authority would in all likelihood continue to lead people both away from and out of the organization. For reactionaries in American politics, Malcolm's charismatic authority would influence a much larger audience and be coupled with an ever-shaping revolutionary Pan-African political and economic ideology. So, understanding charisma and understanding Malcolm as a pure charismatic authority figure, in a Bavarian sense, what does that mean for our people? And how do we gel that with this idea throughout the African world of ancestry? And to understand that, we have to understand a little bit about ancestry. And the question becomes, does Malcolm's charismatic authority stop at the end of his physical life? No. Yeah, exactly. In a memoir written by Malcolm Jarvis, who was Malcolm's teenage friend, Shorty, the guy Shorty, he writes, he quotes Roy Wilkins, who said of Malcolm that he was a master spellbinder. Even in death, he cast a spell far and wide and more disturbing than he cast in life. Now, I don't think Roy Wilkins was any way an open advocate of traditional African spiritual beliefs, but his statement rings true nonetheless. Because if we understand ancestors, and that the dead members of our community watch what we say, and watch what we do, and affect what happens on this earth. And these are ancestors who are invoked constantly. And if you've been to any program recently, nationalist program, whenever we pour libations, I guarantee Malcolm's even the second or third person mentioned. We invoke his name every time, everywhere. And we're not doing it just to do it. We expect that his presence will be with us, or his presence will motivate us, his presence will lead us. So when we understand that, and we understand when Malcolm speaks to those who invoke his presence, they listen and respond. When Malcolm's voice tells us that history is best suited for our study, we go study history. When Malcolm tells us to protect our women with our lives, we do it. And when Malcolm tells us to fight for our human rights and for self-determination by any means necessary, we have no choice but to act. Thus, the anger and confusion felt by many in our community after Dr. Miracle's book was seen both as attack. It was not seen as an attack on a dead, lifeless icon, but one on a living, charismatic, ancestral presence. And as was mentioned earlier, charisma can only be maintained as long as the followers of the leader believe him to be extraordinary. So all this talk about this text or this process of humanizing Malcolm, what do we mean by that? What is the humanizing? Because most of us don't follow leaders that are like us. Just putting that out there. To conclude, I just wanted to say that fortunately, the power of Malcolm's ancestral charisma, the charisma that brought all of us in here today. Like I said, I work right over there, and we have programs. I've never seen so many calls come in. When's the program? When's the Malcolm program? Is it 3 o'clock? Is it 2 o'clock? Is it Thursday? His leadership and authority is still with us. It's still in this room. Al-Hajj and Lee Shabazz are not dead.
What is not often elaborated upon is that when Malcolm left the Nation of Islam, he knew he was going to die. That he knew he had trained many of the Nation of Islam FOI, and he knew that many of these brothers had come out of prison, and that they were ready for danger, and that internally what had happened, I'm not going to go too deeply into that, but he knew that his time was limited, and so therefore lived in a state of fear at one level. But just like I think that any man or woman who's serious about our struggle, you run toward fear. You don't run away from it. And use his last days on this earth to better himself and by extension to better us. And this is why we're here. One thing I did not mention about this wonderful collection is that it was brought into fruition with the generous support of the Lomax company of Philadelphia. So, I just want to make sure that Dr. Maleka Asante is in the book. And as you know, he has created the Maleka Asante Institute here in Philadelphia that Lomax and I and others have had time to go there and spend some meaningful hours. Also in the book are Amir Abdul-Jabbar, Abdul Kilaman. Dr. Abdul Kilaman is the brother of the left. And we've had many battles. But he's in, and this essay is a fine essay. There's a brother by the name of Rick Ayers. You may not know the name, but Rick Ayers is the brother of Bill Ayers. And that's the infamous Bill Ayers. That's so-called influence of our president. Ta-Nehisi Coates, who writes for the Atlantic. He is the son of Paul Coates. Paul Coates founded the Black Classic Press, and he also was a member of the Panther Party. Yes. All right? I just want to mention a couple of these people that's in the book. As I mentioned earlier, Michael Simonga. You may not know that name, but Michael Simonga now heads the African American Arts program for the city of Atlanta. Every 2 years there used to be these African American programs down there. So he's in. Our own Dr. Diane D. Turner. He's in the program. Bahama. Right. So the two of them wrote a wonderful essay that's also here. Finally, I want to say, brothers and sisters, that we just to go to questions at this point. Oh yeah, I mentioned that Dr. Earl Henderson. You may not know Dr. Earl Henderson, but he is a brother who has done very serious work. He's on the faculty at Penn. And he contributed very financially. And there are others. Howard Bronson was Bronson. I guess that's Paul Robeson stand behind. Paul Robeson influenced me also. And I write about this in Yellow Black. I was on my way to basic training at Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri in 1960. 6'1", 131 pounds, like a walking skeleton. And going to the Army because the poor boys answered to unemployment. It is now the poor boys and poor girls answer to unemployment, which is the real 1% that's fighting these wars. Okay? That's the real 1% that nobody cares about. But I was reading Here I Stand by Paul Robeson, and when I stepped off the bus, the white drill sergeant, about 34, 35 years old, saw Paul Robeson's face on the book and snatched it out of my hand and barked in my face, "What's your Negro mind doing reading that black comic?" Well, you know, that's the first time I heard a double negative used so creative. He said, "All you women up against the bus." Now, this is 1960s. Women had not come into the military at any serious level. So it was all 3 black men and the rest white men. All right? And he held my book over his head, and he commenced to tear the pages out the book and give a page to each of the recruits they used as for toilet paper. Now, I don't know what to do. I mean, I can't go AWOL. I don't have a place to go anyway. Because the only reason I'm in the Army because I don't have family, I don't have anything, I'm by myself. All right? So I decided 3 things that day. One was that ideas are important. That ideas and the creators of ideas and the carriers of ideas run the world. We all tap dance to somebody's ideas. If you're Christian, that's an idea. If you're Muslim, if you're Sikh, if you're Hindu, those are ideas. If you're Democrat, Republican, Socialist, Communist, again, ideas. In fact, if you remember the Sugar Hill Gang, that's an idea. Ideas are powerful. And that's why this institution exists. And that's why the African American Studies Department should exist. You see? Again, I get back to where I started with. Any people who control their own culture and imperatives fight for those imperatives. And it's your job now. Okay? Dr. Lomax, I, Jennings. It's your job. You know what I'm saying? We continue to do our work, but it's really your job. And I would suggest, as Dr. Jennings pointed out, that you contact the alumni. And that you bring them back here en masse. Set a date, boom. Let's get back up here and let's turn this thing around. All right? It is an insult for somebody who's not even in the field to come in and essentially direct the program. Direct the program. It's an insult. It's not an insult to you and to us, but to the founder who's still here. And I guess not even allowed in the program. I don't know what the history is. The point is that it is an insult. And if anything, we stand on these shoulders and we're not, we're not laying down for anybody. We're definitely not going to bend over. So it is on us.